Hey, this is Chris with Hacking Your Leadership. On today's discussion on employee engagement, we're continuing the discussion that we started several weeks ago on kind of lesser known or insidious causes of a low employee engagement or low kind of productivity with employees that can't be really associated with the usual suspects like compensation or work environment. But these are kind of smaller things, but they can have a big impact. If you haven't joined us for the previous episodes, go back and listen to them. They are really great discussions. Last week we discussed what happens when employees feel like they have a lack of reward and recognition. On this episode, we're going to talk about what happens when employees feel unheard. And this is very broad, right? Because I think what an employee defines as unheard is different from person to person. There are some people who want this, kind of constant check-in with their leader or with other people. They are constantly wanting to engage and interact with their boss or their boss's boss, or the organization as a whole. They're incredibly bought in from a mindset standpoint, and that comes out in wanting to participate, wanting to contribute, wanting to make things better. And the level of feeling heard that is expected from a person like that might be much higher than a person who is, there to just get a job done and, go on with the rest of their life. And they're not looking to move up or looking to contribute. They do find work, but they're not, actively trying to engage or participate on a higher level. The type of kind of validation or how much that employee needs to be heard might be a little bit less than the first employee I was describing. So this is incumbent upon leaders to figure out what each of their employees needs and how to make them feel heard, because this cannot be defined by the leader. Each person gets to define it for themselves.
Yeah, and I think too, in the context of this article, it's important to kind of call out that like this whole thing is around ideas to boost business performance. Right. Because again, there's the idea of like not being heard with my opinions of anything.
Sure.
And nobody's listening versus I have ideas to help us become better. Mm-hmm. And I call that out because you could there's a lot of overlap there in like ideas and thoughts around how to boost business performance, along with how people feel heard when it comes to maybe their experience and their perspectives and things that they're looking for. And I think for me, it always comes down to like the taking of action. When I hear like people want to feel heard, it's usually that they have an idea, they have a thought, they have a perspective, and they're looking for somebody not just to like listen to it, but actually do something with it. And I think sometimes, in my experience, people have been okay if I come back and say, hey, here's what I've got, here's what was discussed, here's what's going on. This is not something that we would necessarily do, and here's why. Or here's kind of what we've got that is similar to that and may provide us with the same, option that you're thinking of, and or it's a great idea. Here's what it would require to bring that idea to life. And it's not that it's a no, but it's like there's more work that we'd have to do here. So again, just the act of taking thoughts, ideas, perspectives, having dialogue about them, and then taking what you can and implementing that into some type of a strategy. I think for a lot of people, that's what I hear when it comes to like people feeling unheard is like, have you done anything with what I'm sharing?
Right, for sure. There's this element of, speaking as a consultant who works with organizations, there have been times where I've worked with a leader within an organization to build something out, a tool or a process to kind of, help streamline their business or to make the talent selection process better, something like that. And it works really, really well. And then someone else in the organization will see the results of that and they'll come back and say, I want something too. And the very first thing that I'll do is I'll say, okay, I'll respond back with some questions that require some thought and input around the things that they're looking to get done. And how they reply to those questions will tell me everything I need to know about whether or not this is something they just want me to do for them, or if it's something they're bought into actually making happen because they're bought into the idea of it and they really want to, be a participant in this process, not just have it done for them. Because a lot of leaders just want the results that come from something without, putting some individualized culture into it based on what the needs of their individual team is. They're hoping that something that works for another team will work for their team. And oftentimes that's not the case. And so it requires a little bit of due diligence, but I can see the level of buy-in and engagement they have with just those basic interactions. And when employees want to feel heard, it's really similar to this. If a person is giving me an idea of something to boost business performance or outcomes, and I start asking questions around what thought they've put into it, like kind of pushing back a little bit, not from a standpoint of, kind of crapping all over their idea, but genuine curiosity about what have they thought through, not I thought this through and you haven't, let me school you on it. But I love where you're going with that. Like these are some of the questions that I'd want to know, to kind of inform the decision and see whether or not they thought those things through. Because at the very least, even if they haven't thought them through, they might think them through because of that conversation and come to the realization that their idea needs to change or isn't good. Or if they haven't thought them through, you never know whether an idea is whimsical, right? Like they just thought about it in the moment based on a pain point they were experiencing in that moment with one particular interaction with a client or a customer or a process. And that kind of pain point led them to want to revamp the entire thing, whatever that looks like, and start from scratch. And oftentimes those things have been thought through by other people, and just getting a person to a place where they're thinking through them on their own can at least kind of strengthen that muscle, where it's likely that the things that they come to you with in the future might be more thought out. But it might take a few interactions of getting them to do that process before it gets there. If you're a leader of people, I want to go over some of the things you can do with your employees that will allow you to make sure that your employees feel heard, even if you don't necessarily have the ability to say, yeah, whatever your ideas are, let's put them into action right now, because you might not have the authority to do it, or they might not be great ideas. So let's go over those things. But first, let's give it up to word from one of our sponsors. All right, if you're a leader of people, anytime an employee comes to you with an idea to boost business performance, you don't want them to lose what they had in them, that fire in them that led them to do that to begin with. Because just the idea that they're bringing to you means they are bought in to boosting business performance. They want it to get better. They want themselves to get better, the organization to get better. You don't want to lose that, and it's very quick to do that if you don't validate that process of them coming to you. It doesn't require you putting the plan into action, but it does require some follow-up. It does require some question and answers, and it does require some genuine homework on your part as a leader to take the information that the employee's given you and to do some due diligence on the reasons why it wouldn't work, or maybe what's happening in the background on the same thing already, and get back to the employee on the whys behind it. An employee doesn't need to have their idea put into place in order to feel heard, but they need to be validated at the process of bringing it to you. And if it's not a good idea or one that the organization or the team can't do, they need to have a very specific reason as to why that they can buy into and agree with. They could go, oh, I totally see that, why that we would go forward with that. Not just something like, no, we just don't want to do it right now. You have to give them more information, and then that you won't lose what they brought with them that might lead them to bring a better idea in the future.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Like you want people to have that energy. You want people to be able to provide ideas and insights, and you want people to push back on things sometimes where it's not going maybe the way that you planned, or a strategy may have some opportunities. Like you want the dialogue, you want people involved in all of these types of things. And I think that to keep them in that space, like you're spot on, you got to be able to come back to them with something. And even if it's an explanation, or even if it's perspective, or even if it's something where I can tell you right now, like the answer to that is no. And I can tell you why it would be no. Let's walk through that. But it's not a bad idea in theory. I hear what you're saying, but like, let me give you some thoughts or perspective, or maybe let's talk through that a little bit more, and helping them to connect some of those types of dots, because again, that's really important. And then thanking them. Like that's one of the things well that I think is super important. It's like, well, first, thanks for the idea. Like I think that's a big piece of what we need in our culture and in our environment. I want to hear more about that. And even if this isn't the one that goes anywhere, we need more of those, right? And helping people to feel confident and appreciated for their time and for their effort of thinking or sharing their ideas, I think is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. The other thing too that you brought up that I really like is the idea of feeling heard or unheard can come down to simply whether or not you validate their pain point. So if they come up with an idea, it's to solve something that they're having a problem with. And that thing may already be solved by something else that they're not aware of, or it may not be. But even if it's not a great idea, just validating that the problem they experienced and the pain point or the hurdle they experienced is a valid hurdle, that it would frustrate you too. Sometimes that can be enough. The last thing I want to touch on this, because I think it's really important, is the article mentions having a way of giving anonymous feedback so that people can feel heard. Because if it's certain subjects, some people might not feel comfortable coming to you or saying something out loud. The anonymous thing might be better. It's very important to have these things, but it's also very important to categorize or to classify them verbally with employees as saying, just so you know, there are things that we cannot do based on things that you tell us anonymously. There are things that you might bring up of a problem that you're having with another employee or with a leader or with a process in general. And if we have no way of coming back to you and kind of talking with you out about this, then something may not be able to be done by it. So just because you can give us the feedback anonymously or give us the pain point anonymously doesn't necessarily mean something's going to be heard. So at least they go into it with that knowledge and they're not expecting, oh, I can just leave this tip anonymously and my problems are going to be solved. Make sure that they have that caveat with them so they don't come in with more expectations than what you're capable of doing. Thank you all for joining us on this discussion on employee engagement. We'll see you next Thursday for the next one. You have a great day.